Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Swallowed Star original continent based on novel. So let's start. Luo Feng grabbed onto the rocks with both hands. His entire body was trembling. Involuntarily, he looked up. As though he was being forcibly branded with an imprint right in the middle of his brows, a black and white intersecting mark appeared, and a short while later, it was completely hidden and vanished from sight. It could no longer be observed. Luo Feng could not control himself. His body continued to tremble. He opened his eyes and looked toward Duan River, who stood beside him. This is too agonizing. This is the imprint that generations of Duan River descendants had, Duan River said. It is created by our third generation ancestor, and every generation will inherit it. Once inherited, it will be easy to conform to the entire space of inheritance. Being branded with the imprint is a must, as this is the only way to get the space of inheritance to recognize one as its master, and only those who have gained control over this space can receive the true inheritance of the pulse of my Duan River. Luo Feng nodded. The more unique a true treasure was, the more troublesome it was in getting it to recognize its master. Such situations were similar to getting Star Tower and the White Wings to recognize Luo Feng as their master, and this space of inheritance was a treasure that the pulse of Duan River used to hand over its inheritance. It was more precious than a miniature universe, and much more precious than any supreme true treasure. Thus, getting it to recognize its master, how complicated a process would that be? Only those branded with the imprint could attempt to get it to recognize them as its master. I might have been annihilated, but I left behind my virtual consciousness. Duan River looked toward Luo Feng. With my actual thoughts, memories, and character as a template, I have created this consciousness. In this way, I could slowly wait for the next heir to come forth and receive the inheritance. I am able to leave behind this virtual consciousness. This is also a means achievable within this space of inheritance. He laughed. The space of inheritance has a wealth of functions. It is a treasure that 3 generations of ancestors specially created for our inheritance. Later on, you will find out more about every one of these functions. As my virtual consciousness is still in control over this space of inheritance, you are unable to get it to recognize you as its master for the time being. It is a must for me to give up control voluntarily to make it possible for you to get it to recognize its master. Before it recognizes you, you must do one thing. Duan River looked at Luo Feng. Luo Feng said with due respect, "Teacher, please guide me." "Take an oath," Duan River said sternly. "Repeat after me." Luo Feng nodded and listened intently. Duan River said slowly in a solemn tone, "I hereby take this oath, in the name of a newly appointed Duan River, with the imprint of the inheritance as witness. I, Duan River Luo Feng, will not allow the core inheritance of the pulse of Duan River to fall in the hands of outsiders. If I should break my oath, then my soul shall be annihilated. Must I?" Luo Feng looked at Duan River. "You must." Duan River nodded. "Otherwise, you shall be annihilated, and I shall have to choose another heir." Luo Feng nodded and repeated as instructed. "I hereby take this oath, in the name of a newly appointed Duan River, with the imprint of the inheritance as witness. I, Duan River Luo Feng, will not allow the core inheritance of the pulse of Duan River to fall in the hands of outsiders. If I should break my oath, then my soul shall be annihilated." His voice echoed, in his ears and in his mind. The imprint between his brows lit up, and his words were transmitted in short bouts into the depths of his soul. "If I should break my oath, then my soul shall be annihilated. Then my soul shall be annihilated. Then my soul shall be annihilated." These words reverberated persistently within his soul. Luo Feng frowned, as he had doubts. Then he glanced at Duan River standing beside him. Duan River nodded knowingly. "This imprint of the inheritance will stay with you for your lifetime. I know you are a universe knight. You are capable of resurrection. Yet, even upon rebirth, you will still carry on this imprint for eternity. If you break your vow, this imprint of the inheritance will annihilate your soul. Even if you were to be resurrected, you would face annihilation over again. The vicious cycle of resurrection and annihilation would replay over and over again. Luo Feng shuddered. Of course, so long as you do not let the core inheritance fall into the hands of outsiders, nothing will go wrong. Duan Dong River nodded. All right, before you get this space of inheritance to recognize you as its master, I shall tell you about some of the most important information and treasures. Follow me. Duan Dong River pointed far into the void space ahead, and a space door appeared. Duan Dong River and Luo Feng flew right through that space door, one after the other. All over, the place was filled with endless water. And right in the middle, there was a miniature island. On the island was an ordinary wooden house, and before the wooden house was a curved pond. Duan Dong River landed beside the pond. This space is known to be one of the most important out of the various spaces found in the space of inheritance. Duan Dong River pointed to a spot above the pond. You see that? The 3 black stones suspended above the water's surface. Luo Feng looked over. The pond was not big, yet the 3, smooth, crystal-like black stones were suspended above it, floating persistently. This is called the memory stone, also known as the inheritance stone, Duan Dong River said. It can store a large quantity of memories. Even if a super great being has a large amount of memory to be stored, saving every bit of information will still be very easy. He added solemnly, these 3 stones are said to be the root of the pulse of my Duan Dong River. Root? Luo Feng felt a jolt. Take a look inside the pond. Duan Dong River said. Then, with a wave of his hand, all the water in the pond flew up in an instant, revealing numerous black stones at the bottom of the pond. At first glance, Luo Feng thought there could be as many as hundreds of thousands of stones. Now, take a look at the vast ocean. Duan Dong River waved his hand again. An immeasurable amount of water from the vast ocean surrounding the miniature island started to float with a rumble. It was as though there had been a reversal between heaven and earth, where all the ocean water floated up to the sky, leaving the earth below empty, thus revealing numerous ocean trenches and undersea valleys. With a single glance, given Luo Feng's range of view, he caught occasional glimpses of black stones. All those are memory stones, Duan Dong River told him. These 3 are the roots. They make up the essence of the core inheritance. It is the noblest contribution that 3 generations of ancestors had left for the pulse of my Duan Dong River. In that pond, there is a total of 12,002 memory stones, and they all belong to the core inheritance. Duan Dong River laughed. However, these stones represent different kinds of memories related to fields of study, close combat, far-range attacks, refining treasures, automatons, and many more. They also contain techniques and methods of cultivation. Any given stone would be enough to drive everyone from universe ocean into a frenzy. Within that vast ocean, as many as hundreds of millions of memory stones were scattered about randomly. Duan Dong River laughed again. Those were left behind by the great beings from the pulse of my Duan Dong River. As they roamed and wandered, they continuously gathered all kinds of information covering a comprehensive range of content, which they considered all-encompassing. As for information on the basic skills of my home civilization, I should think at least 90% are recorded. Of course, the records are very elementary. It is like receiving the basic inheritance, the idea is the same. Luo Feng was tingling with excitement. A library. This was just like a super library, or, rather, templates left behind by that ancient civilization. By relying on the millions of memory stones in that vast ocean, it was possible to replicate the mid to low power range of that ancient civilization. After all, the information was very basic. These 12,002 memory stones, Duan Dong River said, pointing to the bottom of the pond, are the pride of generations of heirs. These were their hearts and souls. Of course, there were some gathered that also contain important information on cultivation, and these are priceless. Every memory stone is more than enough to set off a war. These 3 are even more likely to set off a war among the superpowers in my home. Remember, All the information within these 3 and the 12,002 stones must not fall into the hands of outsiders. Understood, Luo Feng replied. Try using your godly power to enwrap these 3 memory stones, Duan Dong River said. You have the inheritance imprint. The 3 memory stones will acknowledge you and transfer all the inheritance they contain over to you. Luo Feng held his breath. The essence of the core inheritance. He stood at the apex of knowledge for which 3 generations of ancestors were most proud. 3 invisible godly powers extended out to speedily envelop the 3 black stones, and the moment they came into contact, the 3 black stones started to radiate a faint glow. On the surface, ancient and complex engravings started to appear. Then an influx of information surged and charged its way into Luo Feng's mind. It was a tremendous amount of information being transmitted to him in such an overwhelming amount. Even with Luo Feng's speed of inheriting, the complete transmission took him 1 full day. Duan Dong River stood aside and watched with a smile as Luo Feng opened a pair of eyes filled with shock and disbelief. It was only 3 sets of lost knowledge. The core of the entire pulse of Duan Dong River, its true essence, was none other than these 3 sets of lost knowledge. They were named Duan, Dong, and River. Duan was the abbreviation for Duan Mie, which meant annihilation. It was a unique set of lost knowledge that could bring about an accelerated upsurge of all the power of a godly body, or just a normal flesh and blood body, within a short period of time. It could also cause the ability of a body to improve by hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of times in terms of strength. This set of lost knowledge, if simply put across, was somewhat similar to self-destruction, because self-destruction was the process of gathering all the energy within a body to bring about an outburst of power. Normally, during self-destruction, 2 things would happen. 1. The power of an attack would be scattered in all directions. 2. Once self-destruction was activated, the user would also be annihilated. However, Duan Mie, the core inheritance created by 3 generations of ancestors, was entirely different. It allowed the great being to control the rate at which it was being burned. For instance, within 3 seconds, the entire godly body could be completely burned. The power was controllable. It could be brought to an outburst that was stronger than normal by innumerable times, or could be controlled to last only for 1 fleeting second during a battle, or even controlled by bringing it to a complete halt instantly. Furthermore, during battles, the accuracy of the power could be controlled when attacking components. Duan allowed a great being to skip stages when using it to annihilate enemies. That was why this set of lost knowledge was formidable. Dong was the abbreviated name for Dong Hua, which meant East Brilliance, and was a set of lost knowledge on escaping. Once executed, a great being could transform into a stream of brilliance. The speed was unbelievably fast, so fast as to easily traverse layers of space. This was the most formidable escape technique of the pulse of Duan Dong River. River was short for Undying River, which was a set of lost knowledge that taught the skill of becoming undying. Just like any flesh and blood life form, when they become undying fighters, universe knights, or universe masters, their godly bodies would be converted into a more intangible form of energy. And once they achieved their breakthrough to become universe supreme masters, they would, on the contrary, be reverted back to their origin. When various identities combined as one, the more intangible godly body would take a more concrete form, composed of flesh and blood. This would be truly a flesh and blood life form. Although part of a flesh and blood body could also be burned up and converted to energy like a godly body, ultimately, it was still a flesh and blood life form. Normally, annihilating a universe master or universe supreme master through soul attacks would deprive opponents any chances for resurrections, yet when relying on Undying River, the moment this knowledge had been cultivated to a certain degree, any great being would be able to isolate part of its divided body from its main body. Also, another instance of utilizing this knowledge was hiding a mere drop of blood. Even if the divided body of a great being was hit by a soul attack, and all of it was annihilated, after undergoing unique refining, this drop of blood of the annihilated body could remain unscathed. Thereafter, it could spend some time to speedily absorb energy, and take up its original form again. That would make an undying fighter. Duan Mie allowed its user to achieve an outburst of extreme power when faced with opponents in battle. Donghua, used for escaping, was incomparably formidable. Even if there was no way to escape, one could always rely on Undying River to effect a resurrection. The 3 sets of lost knowledge. Relying on these 3 sets of lost knowledge, every generation of Duan River would only have 1 set of the 3 lost knowledges, yet every generation would see the emergence of 1 terrifying figure. Indeed, they are worthy to be called the lost knowledges of 3 generations of ancestors. Indeed, they are worthy to be called the core of the entire pulse of Duan River. These are simply, certainly, extremely powerful. Luo Feng was tongue-tied. It was no wonder this was the most top-notch inheritance of that ancient civilization, and only a favored elite could inherit it. It was more than enough to drive any great being mad with jealousy. No wonder East Emperor Holy Land and Purple Moon Holy Land coveted it. The 2 ancestors must have long ago heard of certain information regarding the inheritance of the pulse of Duan River. The pond water and endless ocean water were all suspended in mid-air. Duan River said with a solemn expression, when one is weak, there is still room for improvement, as he can still work hard to cultivate and achieve breakthroughs one by one. But things are different when one gets stronger. Any superior great being has to go through countless battles and fights. This is the only way to train and hone skills. For example, to become a true god, or what you all would call a universe supreme master, you will have to go through countless killings to gain extensive experience before you can finally achieve a breakthrough. When starting from the stage of a true god, to continue ascending, every step would entail great difficulty. Great beings are life forms who tread between life and death, but eventually stand firm till the end. Luo Feng heard him and nodded. He agreed with what Duan River said. In fact, from his perspective, to become a universe supreme master, he had to achieve his breakthrough after experiencing battles and fights in which he could hone his skills and abilities. This was how Sitting Mountain Guest and Primal Chaos City Leader had felt in the past, when they sent him out to wander and venture, to steel himself for future breakthroughs. Universe Masters, Universe Supreme Masters, True Gods. All had to tread the paths between life and death. There are many talented ones, and also many determined ones, Duan River said softly. Perhaps for them, they could still make small achievements. But to truly stand on the highest peak, what great being could get there without the help of opportunities? It is impossible for a great being to solely depend on his own ability to make it to the pinnacle. The pulse of my Duan River has 3 most important sets of lost knowledge. When you find yourself dealing with countless life and death battles, they will reduce your chances of being annihilated to the lowest possibility. Of course, even if you manage to escape annihilation, it does not mean that you are undying for sure. Generations of heirs from the pulse of my Duan River died, one by one. Even our 3 generations of ancestors are dead, Duan River shook his head. Which is why one must never, ever take this lightly. Luo Feng nodded, then smiled. The powerful beings we have in our current generation cannot hold a candle to that civilization, so all is fine. It is not that simple. Duan River gently shook his head. Not that simple. Luo Feng was taken aback. What do you mean? First, take a closer look at the 3 sets of lost knowledge you have obtained, Duan River said. Luo Feng immediately started to look more thoroughly. As the 3 sets of lost knowledge each contained an unbelievable amount of information, the memory transmission alone took a long time. And the memory transmission was merely the process of shoving all the information into Luo Feng's memory. Luo Feng still had to take much time to slowly read through them all. With Luo Feng's reading speed, even studying 1 set of lost knowledge, Duan took more than 10 days before he finally registered a change in expression. Found it. Duan River's expression was hard to read. How come it's gone? Luo Feng was shocked as he turned to look at Duan River. Duan was left behind by 3 generations of ancestors. According to the introduction of the entire set of lost knowledge, it should be massive with a total of 9 volumes. Why are there only the first 3 most basic volumes? What about the next 6? I certainly detected those within my memory, but I just cannot read them. Why is this happening? It was a weird feeling. It was like having a vague memory of a certain thing, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not fully recall it. All of the lost knowledge, Duan Mia, was in his memory, he could detect them within his memory, but he just could not recall the remaining 6 volumes. This forgotten feeling came to him before when he was still young, back when his power was extremely weak, but since becoming a super great being, everything that he had gone through in his lifetime, every bit of memory, was easy to look back upon. Not the slightest bit was forgotten. It is because the first 3 volumes set the limit to where the true God stage can cultivate up to, Duan Dong River said. The limit of the true God stage. Luo Feng seemed to vaguely recall something. 3 sets of lost knowledge, and these, Duan Dong River pointed to the black stones at the bottom of the pond. And those. Then he pointed toward the scattered black stones in the vast ocean. All the information, even if you transmit all your memories, the most you can see would be the pinnacle of the true God stage, Duan Dong River elaborated. Various information from any level higher than this, you will not be able to view. Why is this so? Luo Feng was filled with doubts, but he was not bothered. Being unable to read those was not a big deal to him. In any case, there were detailed records of the endless information within the inheritance stones from a normal undying to the pinnacle of a universe supreme master. For him, that was enough. After all, he was only a universe knight. But he was certain that he had the memories in his mind. Who could have so wordlessly, and without a trace, prevented him from looking through his own memories? Because Duan Dong River's gaze was adrift as he sighed softly. That is the willpower of the primal universe. Willpower of the primal universe. Luo Feng was taken aback. That's it. Duan Dong River nodded with a sigh. The primal universe is the most massive celestial body in all of universe ocean. Given such an immense celestial body, every moment, the amount of chaotic energy it consumes is terrifying. Compared to it, the universe boast is simply, Duan Dong River shook his head. Luo Feng nodded. The universe boat might have been big, but if it was compared to the primal universe, it was like a paper boat compared to the sun. If you are living in the primal universe, then being a part of the primal universe will ensure that all is fine for you. Duan Dong River nodded. However, if you are no longer a member of the primal universe, the primal universe no longer protects you. That is where trouble arises. In the universe ocean, who is the most powerful? It is not a matter of who, it is the willpower of the primal universe. Duan Dong River said. Your powers are weak, but you all should be able to feel that. When you fight battles against true gods, the willpower of the primal universe will help you. No matter where you are within the universe ocean, it will help you all. The powers of the true gods will all be suppressed. All their godly powers will completely be suppressed by it. Luo Feng nodded. Yes. Indeed, it would. The willpower of the primal universe was such a massive thing that no one could put up a resistance against it. Teacher Origin had previously fought with the willpower of the Origin, and as a result, he was eternally suppressed. The entire primal universe has it as its backing, said Duan Dong River. The power that the willpower of the Origin can unleash is totally out of your wildest imaginations. He snorted. How do you think this universe boat ended up so battered and shattered? Suddenly, Duan Dong River's expression changed. I cannot say further. Duan Dong River looked toward Luo Feng and added solemnly, there are some things I cannot tell you. You just need to know that throughout the entire universe ocean, there is nowhere that the origin of the primal universe does not have control over. Fortunately, it is only a simple willpower that was formed by the massive universe law, and does not have any desires. Otherwise, I have no idea what it would become. If you want to transcend it, there is only one way. Duan Dong River looked at Luo Feng. Break through a reincarnation. Break through a reincarnation, and you will find yourself in a whole new setting. Information related to the pulse of my Duan Dong River is stored in those memory stones. For now, you can only see up to the true God stage, but the moment you make it through a reincarnation, you can see everything. Luo Feng gave a slight nod. Although Duan Dong River did not say much, Luo Feng vaguely realized that, in the beginning, when Duan Dong River and the numerous great beings of that civilization boarded the universe boat, there were implications related to the willpower of the primal universe. Thereafter, the destruction of the universe boat was likely due to the willpower of the primal universe. You and I are different, said Duan River. You are a member of the primal universe. Or at least up until now, you still are. He laughed. This is why you are protected by it. Suddenly, Duan River waved. The black stones scattered beneath the suspended, endless ocean waters, the wide ocean trenches, and the underground valleys, as well as those at the bottom of the pond before them, all flew up into the air and made their way to Duan River. Very quickly, Duan River stored everything. Hong. Long. Long. With a rumble, the vast ocean water and pond water suspended high up in the sky fell. Follow me. Duan River pointed somewhere ahead. Before them, ripples started to form and gave rise to a space entrance. Luo Feng followed obediently. Both entered the space entrance one after the other and quickly arrived in a new space. It was a vast world with seemingly no boundaries to speak of. The surroundings were an endless darkness, and what they stood on was a piece of land with a diameter that was only as big as over 10 kilometers. This is a space where time is accelerated. Duan River pointed far into the endless darkness. This darkness seems to have no boundaries, but in truth, all of these are not real. This space for time acceleration is small. It only consists of this piece of land. A smaller area will allow a smaller energy consumption when making use of time acceleration, he added with a laugh. I would have long ago been annihilated. My control alone can only bring time acceleration to 10,000 times. As for you, the stronger your godly power gets, the moment you start manipulating it, time acceleration will naturally get faster. Under the influence of time acceleration, you will be able to extend the time you need for cultivation. Duan River waved, and a single black stone floated before Luo Feng. Actually, I have been lonely for countless reincarnation eras. I have so much to say, so much to entrust, and so many proud moments of the pulse of my Duan River that I want to share with you. Duan River shook his head slowly. However, when you received the 3 sets of lost knowledge, I suddenly realized that I was actually annihilated long ago. What more can I not bear to part with? So I have recorded everything into this memory stone. It will tell you all I want you to know, and it records every single secret of the entire space of inheritance. After seeing it for yourself, you will understand everything. Duan River looked up at the boundless darkness. Then, squatting down, he grabbed some mud from the ground and sniffed. He smiled and said, I was dead long ago. What you see of me now is nothing more than an image of a virtual consciousness. Virtual. I am merely something virtual. I was never a life form in the first place. Duan River was shattered into bits and pieces. Then he vanished. Teacher. Duan River. Luo Feng shouted. But he was the only one left. Luo Feng was in a daze. This. He was trapped in a place like this. How could he find the way out? Hong. Streams of light rays appeared amidst the vast darkness, and speedily charged over to enshroud him. Luo Feng looked toward the sky where streaks of black and white light rays were falling upon him. There was nowhere to hide as they all gathered and approached Luo Feng. The imprint of inheritance between Luo Feng's brows appeared automatically. The imprint, which consisted of intertwining black and white lines, started to revolve. Endless light rays surged into Luo Feng's body. Then peace and quiet were restored. An incomparable sense of affinity grew in Luo Feng's heart as he looked around him. With an intention in mind, a seedling suddenly emerged from the ground and started to grow. It grew lusher. More started to spread out. In a short moment, over 10 kilometers of land had transformed into a meadow. Recognizing its master, Luo Feng was taken aback. The space of inheritance had recognized him as its master. Although he still felt a little unfamiliar, he could sense the entire space of inheritance. Duan River has voluntarily given up all his control rights. Luo Feng looked to his side, where Duan River had been grabbing mud from the ground just moments ago. He recalled what Duan River had said earlier. Suddenly, Luo Feng realized that Duan River might have disappeared for good. In this universe ocean, only he, the 193rd generation of Duan River, remained. Although he had already gotten the space of inheritance to recognize its master, Luo Feng still held many doubts regarding the boat of mausoleum and space of inheritance. Right away, he used his godly power to envelope that memory stone, and shortly after, a large amount of information was transmitted to him. It was detailed information left behind by Duan River's virtual consciousness, before it was dispersed, concerning the various functions and areas to pay attention to within the space of inheritance. It also included what he needed to tell Luo Feng regarding the remodeling that he had done to the boat of mausoleum. The information was so detailed that it included where the core control of boat of mausoleum was and how to control it. All this information was made known to Luo Feng via that memory stone. The 3 generations of ancestors prepared information so meticulously. Luo Feng was in awe. Almost 95% of the entire space of inheritance is filled with the achievements of the 3 generations of ancestors. Only 5% are some functions added on by the other generations of heirs. This entire space of inheritance is the perfect place for a great being to cultivate. Luo Feng was shocked. It was detailed beyond words. If not for the information Duan River left behind, even though Luo Feng was recognized as master by the space of inheritance, he would have likely had to wander around and study the place before he could understand all corners of it. Yet now, everything was well within his control. The space of inheritance was actually like a miniature universe divided into many individual spaces. There was a space resembling a super library, where there was a tremendous amount of memory stones that contained an equally large amount of information. Almost every fundamental technique of the ancient civilization was recorded, and there were countless precious experiences that led directly to the road of the highest peak, experiences of generations of heirs and the countless precious information that they had gathered. There was also a space that seemed to be used specially for combat training, a miniature virtual space where there were numerous opponents, a total of 282 of them, and amongst them, the generations of Duan River were also included. The moment one's consciousness entered the virtual space, one could exchange blows with these virtual opponents, and these virtual opponents were capable of executing the same mighty power of corresponding super beings. The strongest opponents were, naturally, the 3 generations of ancestors. There was a space that seemed to be used specially for creating secret techniques. There was a space specially used to cultivate one's weapons. There was a space specially for mediation. There was a space specially for. To conclude, the entire space of inheritance was the epitome of perfection, the best place for a great being to stay in for cultivation, as it was filled with, and continuously supplied with, knowledge and functions by generations of heirs. This is too extravagant. Luo Feng could not help blinking. Before accepting the inheritance, he had entertained many kinds of imaginations, but upon truly getting into contact with it, he realized that he was not adventurous enough in his imagination. He had underestimated Duan River's generations of heirs. This so-called, extravagant to the maximum limit, space of inheritance. If one was within here, then regardless of how short or long it took, it would be impossible for one not to become a super great being. Furthermore, the pulse of Duan River had always been very stringent in its requirements of an heir. To be chosen, one had to be absolutely gifted and determined, and possess various other superior qualities. Even if there was no inheritance to be handed down, this heir would eventually be someone of great achievement. Once the chosen heir had the help of the space of inheritance, it would be like giving wings to a tiger. One would naturally be fueled with even greater strength to go further and higher. In Universe Ocean, fighting for inheritances until everyone gets badly battered, especially using techniques such as Divine Eye Clan's so-called law of combined attacks, is something that is very common to the ancient civilization, and it only constitutes part of it. There are many trivialities that may include even soul attacks, illusions, refining true treasures, creating manipulative automatons. There are so many that it is impossible to count them all. Luo Feng was in awe. He came to realize that whatever he knew about the ancient civilization was very basic. To the pulse of Duan River, this basic information that was stored in the 10 million memory stones was all pretty much inconsequential. Thus, it was up to the generations of Duan River's descendants' discretion whether they wanted the information to be kept within the pulse or to be shared with other groups of powers. Knowledge is power. The experiences of countless great beings and their beliefs in the cultivations of countless studies, all of these were creations by numerous preceding great beings in succession. This is where the fundamentals originate. The first thing Luo Feng did was practically in sync with what any of the preceding generation of Duan River would do, which was to recall everything that was recorded within these memory stones. Perhaps he might not be treading the paths of certain groups of studies. Or he could touch on some knowledge that might be helpful to his own cultivation process. Or, probably, when he met with opponents of a foreign group of studies in an actual fight, he would know a thing or two about his opponents' backgrounds, strengths and weaknesses as well. Bring it on. Luo Feng made a single wave. In an instant, a large number of black stones, such a tremendous number that they were counted in the millions, were suspended in mid-air. Categorize them. Luo Feng divided his godly power to get in contact with all the memory stones simultaneously, then started to process the different parts of information that he got in contact with, classifying them after coming to a verdict. Shortly after, the countless memory stones were being sorted into different categories. First, he would categorize them, then he would start memorizing. Luo Feng was in a cultivation space where time velocity reached 10,000 times. And he only spent around 15 days to memorize the entire core inheritance. The actual time spent was a few hundred years. Thereafter, he started on a job that was on a much larger scale. It was to start memorizing the information stored in over 100 million memory stones. There was over 100 million memory stones, but every stone was only a small part of the fundamental, which was why the amount of information was far from that of the core inheritance. Yet he still required close to 30 years to finish accepting the entire amount of information, which was actually 30 eras. Upon complete acceptance, Luo Feng started to read and study thoroughly, and the amount of time he used was much longer compared to the amount of time spent on merely accepting the information. Previously, it was just trying to force all the information from the countless books into his mind. Now, he had to slowly go through them all. The boat of Mausoleum was still floating in mid-air within the flame ice region, but the cabin doors were shut. Occasionally, there would be great beings passing by with envy in their eyes, but they did not dare to stay for long and left quickly, as they were afraid of incurring the wrath of that Duan River, who could, after all, exterminate second true master and seventh true master in an instant. While various groups of powers of Universe Ocean were suspicious and speculating, where the majority of them were unclear of who the heir was, Luo Feng was, on the contrary, able to study at ease. Being in the space of inheritance, he knew he was in safe hands. Besides, the space of inheritance was within the boat of Mausoleum. The moment the boat of Mausoleum closed, no one from Universe Ocean would be able to intrude. As for those who dared to set foot in the boat of Mausoleum, they would be courting their doom. The boat of Mausoleum might not be able to attack those outside it, but Duan River had remodeled it so that internally, there were many terrifying means that served to ambush intruders. Any Universe Supreme being who dared to intrude would be asking for death. With the passing of time, Luo Feng gained much understanding about the breakthrough of every level, from Undying to Universe Knight to Universe Master to Universe Supreme Master. He was even aware of things like which level a Universe Supreme Master had to continue to advance toward. He was, in fact, very knowledgeable in this aspect. Even the Universe Supreme Masters did not know as much as Luo Feng. In that ancient civilization, there was a very clear analysis in this aspect. So within the inheritance of the pulse of Duan River, all of these analyses were considered part of the ordinary, peripheral information stored within the memory stones. They simply carried no value of confidentiality. Luo Feng might only be a Universe Knight, but there was no questioning his qualification in providing guidance to Universe Masters. He might even be qualified enough to offer guidance to Universe Supreme Masters. After all, the Universe Supreme Masters within Universe Oceans were all like blind men crossing the river, even if they had all achieved their breakthroughs, they were all still so muddlehead, because there was too little experience from predecessors where they could learn from to begin with. So there was simply no way they could carry out their studies in a systematic manner. In the blink of an eye, 2,600 years had passed since Luo Feng accepted the inheritance. In the virtual universe, within one of the individual plane surfaces belonging to Huge Axe Creator, Luo Feng has become the heir for so long, yet after sending us one mail, he seems to have vanished. Surrounded by a vast and dark starry sky, in the godly palace floating in mid-air, Primal Chaos City Leader and Huge Axe Creator were seated facing one another. In terms of friendship, Primal Chaos City Leader and Huge Axe shared a very close friendship. Previously Teacher Origin had guided both Primal Chaos City Leader and Huge Axe. As Primal Chaos City Leader was more obedient and followed every teaching, when he was under Teacher Origin's tutelage, he was the older disciple. Huge Axe was different, he was a wilder character and preferred a nonconformist approach, and he was often out wandering, which was why Teacher Origin and Huge Axe did not share a teacher-disciple relationship. Yet it was unquestionable that Primal Chaos City Leader and Huge Axe were both Teacher Origin's very first disciples, of which one was the disciple of highest seniority, while the other was a true disciple without an acknowledged teacher-student relationship. Huge Axe was like an older brother, especially after Teacher Origin was suppressed. The entire human race was dependent on the two of them. As time grew longer, the two naturally forged a deep friendship as they often met together for discussions. "Ha ha, you really are worried about your darling disciple." Huge Axe laughed out loud. "Yes, I am worried that there may be accidents." Primal Chaos City Leader shook his head. Who will know anything about the ancient civilization? That Duan River may have other ulterior motives, who knows? "Can't you just ask Luo Feng directly?" Huge Axe said. "I'm worried that I will be disrupting his progress of accepting the inheritance." Primal Chaos City Leader gave a slight frown. "What are you worried about? Luo Feng has a few great bodies. How can it be possible that when accepting the inheritance, he cannot even spare a tad bit of consciousness into the virtual universe?" Huge Axe shook his head in objection. "If you are worried, then let me approach him." Huge Axe was more forthright. Without further ado, he sent a mail to Luo Feng. Very quickly, a lone figure appeared out of thin air before the quiet godly palace. That was Luo Feng donning a simple white robe, because he was used to wearing his silver armor. That was why Luo Feng was naturally inclined towards colors like silver and white. Luo, Huge Axe Creator, was about to open his mouth to say something, but suddenly, furrows appeared within his brows as he carefully observed Luo Feng. Primal Chaos City Leader, who was usually a meticulous thinker, was also surprised when he looked at Luo Feng. Both of them were supposedly great beings of such high ranks. And both could tell at one look. The Luo Feng that stood before them had undergone an overwhelming chance. That was an inherent change from deep within, just like how the disposition of some who had battled frequent enough to become more determined and aggressive while others had studied enough books to gain the so-called scholarliness. Different experiences would bring about different changes in dispositions, and when Luo Feng had absorbed the foundation of that entire ancient civilization, his original vision and realm of thoughts underwent an earth-shattering change. And this had surpassed many other Universe Supreme Masters. He could even be a teacher of several Universe Supreme Masters, someone capable enough to provide them with guidance. Seems like this inheritance is quite extraordinary. Huge Axe turned to look at Primal Chaos City Leader and with a sigh, he said, "The moment I saw him, the feeling was the same as what I felt back then when I first met Teacher Origin. Besides, Teacher Origin liked wearing white robes too. He does exude a similar feel." Primal Chaos City Leader also commented amidst laughter. Luo Feng walked up and said, "Huge Axe Creator, teacher, please don't tease me. It's quite obvious." Huge Axe started, "You gained big time. How do you feel?" Primal Chaos City Leader was no longer jesting around as he continued to say, "How is the inheritance this time round? Is it helpful to our human race in any way? Are you confident in getting our human race to transcend reincarnation?" Even Huge Axe's eyes were filled with the same eagerness. Luo Feng nodded. "From the stage of an undying all the way to the limit of a Universe Supreme Master, everything is within my heart." How certain and confident he sounded. Huge Axe and Primal Chaos City Leader looked at one another, and both pairs of eyes were shining brightly. This video will end here.